It's time again for another President's Challenge, and this month the President's Challenge is to safely turn a winged piece. And I happen to have my initials next to this one because this is one of my suggestions, and in fact wing bowls is kind of one of my things. And one of my favorite applications, and in fact what I use most to make wing bowls, are small logs that might otherwise produce less than spectacular bowls. For example, I really like this plum wood, but the log itself was only about 5 inches wide, so you might get a 4.5 inch bowl. And so what you would end up with is something relatively unspectacular. If I'm to take away the wings, you basically have a little rice bowl. But because I used a longer piece than was necessary to make the bowl, I have all this extra wing material, and a lot of times where you would normally cut away heartwood, you've got the heartwood running up the bowl. And as well, I even managed to keep the bark on, and I have a natural edge, and much nicer than a little rice bowl. I also find wing bowls a good way to make use of slightly irregular small logs. For instance, this one has the pith slightly offset, so I have two choices. I either have to disregard all this part over here and get a slightly deeper bowl, which means now I'm going to use less of the log overall, so my bowl would be about like that, or I can make a much shallower bowl. I can disregard all this material down here and treat the log like that. But with the wing bowl, I can leave a small bowl section here, and I can keep all this as the wing. In fact, I have a slightly wider wing on one side than the other. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is I want to mark the pith down the center. So I'm looking at the end here, and my pith is right there. I'll transfer that to the top and turn around the other side. The pith's right about there, and I'll transfer that to the top, and then I'll strike a line right down the pith on the face. And I want that to be the center of my bowl. I'm not too concerned about it being centered this way. Unless you really want it to be a balanced bowl, then I would measure this halfway and mark it halfway. But I find that when you're going to have a slightly offset pith, which is going to give you a wider wing on this side, I actually don't like the bowl center. I like to offset it a little bit, but I don't want to offset it too much. I've offset my center about 1 inch, and I've also lined up with the pith right there. So that's going to be the center of my bowl section. Now, as far as mounting it, this piece is small enough and won't be too far out of balance that I'm comfortable using a screw chuck. So I'll just put a little hole for my screw chuck. Now, if it was a larger piece, or if it was severely off balance, I wouldn't hesitate to go to a faceplate for added security. So I've got the piece mounted on the screw chuck, and a few pieces of safety before we get started. This piece is still off balance. I don't expect any trouble, but just to be sure, I'm going to bring the tailstock in, at least until I know that everything's okay, and it's not going to come flying off. Also, I'll leave that in while I remove some of this material, and it'll become more balanced. The second thing to be aware of is that with a regular bowl that's symmetrical, if it's spinning and it comes off the lathe, it tends to just become a wheel, and it might, come towards you, but it's not going to cause you too much harm. But with this, as these wings start to form, they're really being swung around, and if this thing ever broke apart, this whole alley right here, that's the danger zone. So you don't want to be hanging out looking at shadows when you're doing this kind of work. I like to stay to the side, do my work from the side. That way, if it does blow up, even wearing a face shield, it's going to blow up to the side of me. I don't want that stuff coming at my chest. The other thing is I like this kind of tool rest because it has a large thick section right here, because what happens a lot of times is your fingers will come underneath the tool rest and they get smacked a little bit, and that kind of hurts. So I like to always make sure I have tool rest for the whole length of where the wood's going to be exposed. So this one, I have another one that's a little bit larger for larger pieces, but I want to make sure that all of my work is inside the end of my tool rest. That way I know as long as I'm on this side of the tool rest and I'm not coming inside of the tool rest here, I know that my fingers are going to be safe from this thing swinging around. And the last thing, as I stand to the side, is whenever you have unbalanced work like this, you always want to bring up the speed slowly to see whether it's going to start bouncing your lathe around or whether it's going to be unstable. You can see even a little bit of unstableness is making the lathe bounce around pretty well. So the first thing I need to do is I need to remove a lot of material where the wings are going to be. So my bowl section is going to be right about there, and all this is going to have to go away. Now some people are going to ask, can you cut this away in the bandsaw? The problem is if I start cutting with this edge against the table of the bandsaw, I'm going to have the bandsaw blade coming through the work. That's okay, but as it exits, it's going to be exiting out into air. And that's going to be, just like in turning when you have an unsupported cut, the piece is going to want to get rolled over on the bandsaw. So if you can find a jig that you can cut that in the bandsaw, that's fine. But I wouldn't recommend trying to freehand this stuff, freehand cutting away most of this material, simply because you can't do a supported cut in the bandsaw freehand that way. But I find it's not that difficult. I just do it on the lathe, because especially on a small piece like this, it doesn't take that long to remove the material. And here we go. Whoop. Try to go at as much speed as I can without making the lance. Try to find a spot that's fairly stable. And now you may have noticed that my tool rest is not exactly perpendicular to the lathe bed, and that's actually on purpose. We'll see what that's for pretty soon. It's actually a pretty cool thing that you can do with the wings. The wing of the gouge actually did a pretty decent job scraping this material. There's some tiny tear out. Haven't quite reached the corners here. So the bowl's feeling pretty well balanced now. I've removed the bulk of the material that was causing it to be unbalanced. The other thing to notice, because I had that tool rest at an angle, you can kind of see where it's going. If you look at the edge here, it's actually slightly arced. And so we're actually getting a nice curve on the wings without actually making curved cuts. We're using straight cuts, but we're getting a curved surface. You can see that 40 bowl gouge, that is a 40-degree bevel with the 40-degree wings. Together it makes less than 90 degrees and makes it really easy to get into corners with work like this. Although the wing of the gouge left a pretty good surface, it's still got a few ripples in here, and it's got some little tiny tear out. And I could just sand it, but the problem with sanding this, it's a real pain to sand. I don't want to bring a power sander, because every time I try to do that, I end up mucking up the nice clean edge inside of here. And so a lot of this has to be done by hand. So I try to get it as clean as I can with tools, and the way I like to go over it is with a negative rake scraper, just like any other scraper. But it does a little bit nicer of a job. It has a burr turned up, so I grind it on this side so the burr is coming up this way. It's also very forgiving. It doesn't self-feed like a regular scraper. The disadvantage is that edge, that burr, doesn't last very long. And one of the ways I find to prolong it a little bit is to use a lower speed. You don't need a lot of speed with scraping. It doesn't affect the quality of finish like speed does when you're cutting. So once again, I'm going to use the tool rest as a guide so I can go move the tool straight. And as soon as I find the edge here, it's just a matter of and if that's a scraper, you can go both ways. Alright, so I've got the bottom mostly finished. I'll have to finish the bottom later on after I do the top side to get rid of the spigot. So I'm going to do a little preliminary sanding on the base and on the wings. Alright, time to turn it around and do the other side. Whoops, I actually forgot I had this on a screw chuck. So I'll whoop. Since that tenon is so small, I actually need to change chucks to a smaller jaws. Alright, with the bowl turned around, I need to mark my depth. So as I do the top of the wing, I want to make sure I'm matching the curve, the line, the offset, the angle that I use the tool rest to the bottom of the wing. I want to match that as, it doesn't have to be spot on because we're actually really going to look at, monitor how thick this is. But you want it to kind of get a good eye, at least an eyeball in the ballpark. Now the thing about when we did the bottom of the wing, there's enough thickness left here that we could do the whole thing at once. But as we do the top, this wing is going to thin out a lot. So we can only go back over so far. So we have to take it in increments. Probably maybe about 1 inch at a time, no more than that. And I'm actually going to switch to a smaller gouge to do this. Alright, that's almost there. Just gotta turn around and clean off the bottom and we're done. So what I'm gonna do, I'll mount this back in a jam chuck, but as we'll see in a minute, those wings, they got so much in the way while making the bowl are actually gonna help us out. We need to get this jam chuck to fit. Let's take off a little bit more, just a hair. To do that, since it's such a small amount, I'm just going to use a scraper. Alright, so those wings that made this bowl so difficult when we're doing our turning is actually going to help us out now, because instead of bringing the tailstock, I can simply bring in a rubber band or if you have some miniature bungee cords, anything to keep it from popping off the jam chuck. Well, it seems these President's Challenges have me jinxed. That's only the second time I've blown up a winged bowl on the lathe. But as predicted, it did blow up in a straight line, right in the line of fire. And the only injury I got was a couple little scratches on my left arm. Other than that, everything was safe. So I'm gonna have to go find another chunk of wood, because I still have to come up with something for the President's Challenge. So, well, I don't have that much time left before the meeting, so I better run and find myself another piece of wood. So until next time, I'm Brian Havens, and thanks for watching.